Everybody, next up here on Wiregrass Daily News Sports. As everybody saw, my thing just fall off in the background. It's okay. You'll see part of my window here on the feed on the video here. But anyways, I am joined by Blake Lovell from Southeastern 14. Also check out his NFL podcast, Established the Pass. We're going to talk some SEC basketball, predominantly Alabama and Auburn. But Blake, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
No, I always enjoy it, Philip. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's hard to believe college basketball season is almost here, but here we are, 2 weeks away. So,
Yeah, I know. I was watching football on the SEC network, and then I started seeing the advertisement at the bottom. SEC Media Days, 18th and 19th of October. I said, all right, it's coming, it's here, which I know is the 6th and the 7th of November when everybody kind of gets going. But SEC Media Days was last week. I thought no better time to have you on. And just they've got Tennessee winning the conference. Anything stick out to you where everybody kind of found everybody?
yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by the Tennessee pick because I think that's who I would pick to win the conference right now. I just think that overall, especially if they get Zakai Ziegler back, don't know what that time frame looks like, but if he plays this season, that gives you an all SEC guard and to add to a pretty good team already that's pretty deep and defense, we know what to expect. I think they'll be better offensively. So, I mean, I thought that was pretty, understandable to have Tennessee there. Not really surprised, I guess, much else in terms of the order, because again, there's a lot of similarities. I think, for me, Alabama and Auburn, I could see them sandwiched together. I know they were picked fifth and sixth. I don't know if I could see them at, I could see them at 3-4, 4-5, 5-6. So I'm not shocked by that. I think those are two teams that, I mean, I've said going into it, I think both teams have questions, but I think they're still both capable of winning the league if they answer some of those questions. So yeah, I mean, it's as you know, and we talked about over the years, it's just kind of one of those things where you look at kind of the way this league is structured now. Kind of had the real big influx of new coaches last year. Saw some of those guys come in and have success right away, specifically Dennis Gates at Missouri. It's just hard to kind of keep your spot, and not be a team that falls backward significantly. But I don't think Alabama and Auburn are going to be in that spot given their two coaches. So,
Yeah, it was just kind of interesting going into. I start with Alabama, and just they ranked 24th too in the AP poll too as well. NATO's, and I just want to ask you too. You look at Alabama, and they've had a lot of success. NATO's, and you look at last year, 31 wins, the most in school history, and number one seed, SEC regular season and tournament titles. But obviously, the up tempo, the 3-point barrage style of play, Alabama likes to play. Is that conducive to winning in March? You think?
yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's just a matter of who you're playing, and I think your opponent's style, right? Because there are some teams that you can really overwhelm with that type of style, and we've seen that so many times now under Nate Oates. I mean, we've just seen examples where they just go off and they just blow teams out for no reason other than they push the tempo, they're making shots, other teams just can't keep up, they can't slow them down. And so, yeah, I think that is one where you see that. But then, of course, you are going to see different examples where, you look at I mean, you can really take last year for an example, right? I mean, if you just kind of look at the way the San Diego State game played out, now that was a team obviously that wound up going on a great run and, getting as far as they did to the national championship. A great defensive team that does, kind of dictate the tempo and, possession type stuff where they just really grind you out. Sure, that could always be one that I think you look at and say, okay, if we're looking for a team that could, make us struggle, and obviously that was a great perimeter defensive team. What were they holding opponents to like 20, 28, 29% from three. So it just, yeah, you have that prototype, I think, of a team that can counter that type of style. But I mean, as we've seen, like I said, I think it's just they know what they are recruiting to in terms of style. They get guys in there that can play that style, understanding that you've got to have the right players to do it. And yeah, I mean, they're making it work for them, right? More often than not, especially, look at winning league titles 2 of the past 3 years. And, the only one where they didn't have that kind of success was the team that, quite frankly, didn't shoot the ball as well and didn't play defense. And so, so I think the style works against a lot of teams, but as always, as with any style, I think there's always that Achilles heel that's out there just kind of waiting to pick you apart the way that, a couple teams did to them last year.
Yeah, it's like if you can be more slow down ball, but then you run into a team like Alabama, that could also give you trouble. So, it's like you just
Well, and
never know.
physicality too, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think you look at, I mean, specifically when I think about like San Diego State, Tennessee, A&M, UConn. Remember they played UConn earlier in the year last year. I mean, that's something too where you get those kind of teams that just sort of turn it into just a very physical, push you around type style. Sometimes that can be it too. But when you have those guys that can, match up with that, it's okay. So
I don't know. You talk about Tennessee, and we'll continue Alabama in a second. I'll just say this: I just sometimes wonder, do they just look at the football team and get jealous? And let's do that on basketball court. It's just,
I mean, listen, we talk about teams that have perfected their style and recruit to their style. Tennessee has done just that because we can talk all we want about their offensive issues over the years and inconsistencies, but defense is always there, and they have figured out exactly how to play it and how they're going to do it. And hey, it's working. So other teams don't like it, that's for sure.
no, that's a good thing. They make teams uncomfortable with the way they play. And if you score 50 points on Tennessee, I think you've had a great a great game
Yeah.
against them sometime.
Yeah.
Was it last year against Auburn? They had like a 47-40. Neither team hit 50. I think they had a game that came out to the
Yeah.
wire like that.
That was that 46-43 game.
That's it.
Yeah, it was awful. I mean, but again, that's when you thought about that game going in, if you could have picked out a handful of games on the schedule and said, what game winds up 46-43, I probably would have put that one as a possibility. Just given, again, kind of the offensive issues for those two teams, but also knowing defensively what they could do. So, yeah, I mean, hey, if it works, it doesn't always have to be pretty, right?
That's it. That's it. All that matters in the day is getting that W. Hey, in March, it's survive in advance. It's not look
Yep.
pretty in advance. It's survive in advance. So that's all that
Yep.
matters. Of course, Alabama too. You look at it. I mean, they got a lot of guys replaced from last year. Now they've dipped into the portal, but obviously going to start out with Brandon Miller, and obviously you cannot replace him with one player. But I also look at Noah Clowney, and then Charles Bediako. I mean, Bediako was a rim protector. I remember when they played Kentucky. I mean, Oscar Tshiebwe had no answer for him on the inside. It's just when you look at Alabama's front court, of course, they bring in Grant Nelson out of the transfer portal. He comes from North Dakota State. I mean, he's voted first team All SEC. Hasn't played in the SEC yet.
Oh.
What's your thoughts on how this team's front court could look?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd be lying if I said that's not one of the questions I have because, I think the way I put it is I would look at this team probably maybe not significantly different, but I would look at this team different if Charles Bediako was still on the roster. I would say that may be my team I'm picking to win the league right off the bat. But I think, and look, right, we could say that about Miller or Clowney too, but I think Bediako for this team was the one that they really needed a guy like that. Because I don't know that I see a guy like that on this roster right now. Because again, Grant Nelson's going to come in, and we know, right? Like, what are the things that most excite people about him? It's the offensive side of the floor, and all the things he can do, just in terms of all those things. Now, of course, he also blocks shots, right? He's 6'11", but I think it's going to be a transition. I feel like defensively, offensively may not be as big of a transition, but defensively, I feel like we always see this with guys who come into the league, that have coming in, that are transferring in from, up transfers, basically. There is a transition to just the physicality of the SEC, like we talked about a minute ago, on ball, defending, those kind of things. Like when you're guarding, guarding a Janai Broom, find yourself guarding, Toulouse Smith and guys like that. It's a transition, and so I think he's going to be fine though, right? Like you said, he's picked first team All SEC. I have no issue with that. Nick Pringle, I think, could have a breakout season. He's obviously going to get a lot more opportunity to do that this year. I think, to me, you bring in a Muhammad Wagi for West Virginia. He'll be someone I think that'll help them defensively. To me, I think the key guy in the front court is Sharon Stevenson. And I just think you're talking about a guy who reclassified, 6'11" freshman, top tier guy who can protect the rim. But is he Noah Clowney? Is he Charles Bediako? No, I mean that's placing unfair expectations on what he's going to be able to do right away. So I think you've got a lot of answers in the front court in terms of, like, if you have specific questions about things, it's like, okay, yeah, it's probably going to be that guy that does that, or that guy's going to do that. But I think it is sort of a wait and see approach for me, because it is much different than it was a year ago. I mean, as I said a minute ago, what's the common denominator in the two championship teams that Alabama's had in recent years? It's not been just the elite offense. It's been the defense. It's been
Mhm.
because they've just been so good defensively. And I've said, I mean, everybody knows it. Alabama fans, I know, get on to me, but like, hey, that's the question I have. Can this team be as good defensively? Can they be elite on defense? And that's not just for the front court. That's across the entire board. Um, I don't know. I can't strongly say yes on that question. Whereas last year, I think I could have easily said that going into the season. So that's the one thing I wonder about, and it is going to start with the front court though, in terms of just the rim protection.
Yeah, then in the backcourt, of course, they lose. Javon Quinley, he transfers to Memphis, but you bring in Aaron Estrada, comes from Hofstra, a good 3-point shooter, which we know that's what they like. 37% 3-point shooter, 20 points per game last year. And then Mark Sears there in the backcourt. How do you see their backcourt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like when you start with Sears, you're okay, right? Like you got
Mhm.
somebody who's been in the league now, he's played, scorer, assist man. He'll drive the defense in the perimeter just because of how many steals he can get. But then, beyond that, right? Again, it's the same thing. It's you're banking on a lot of guys stepping up and replacing all this production that you lost. And I think that they've got options, whether it is Estrada, um, I think just his scoring will be terrific there. He'll also be able to defend pretty well, I think. Up transfer, all right? He's transferring from Hofstra. Latrell Wrightsell, up transfer, transferring from Cal State Fullerton. Someone else who I think he'll play multiple positions for him. Kind of a big physical type guard. I think that will be really good in the SEC, as we know. Rylan Griffin, someone who I would imagine start some games for them, just given the experience of last year and now coming back into the fold on a team like this that is replacing a lot of pieces. Chris Parker, another guy. Just keep going. I think that's where, when you look at it from this standpoint, I mean, again, it feels like the same thing as the front court, where it's like you're banking on a couple different guys stepping up. By the way, I forgot to mention Sam Walters earlier too,
Mhm.
in the front court. Someone else who obviously high expectations for him. I guess one of the recent was it the scrimmage they had or something. He was the kind of the MVP, I guess. So yeah, so I mean, you've got a deep roster. It's just you see how this all pans out, and I don't know, is this team going to shoot it as well? I don't know, because it's really going to depend on if some of these guys come in or making shots right away. But they'll get their opportunities. Guards are going to get their opportunities in a NATO system. So I'm intrigued to see how the rotation, and that's what I said. I think Alabama's one of those teams minute wise. I have no idea what to predict in terms of what that 1 through 7 rotation looks like. Who gets this many minutes? I know Sears is going to be on the floor. I know Nelson's going to be on the floor. I mean, beyond that, like, I mean, again, if you're just talking about, you have a pretty high expectation of who's going to be doing what. But in terms of the minutes distribution, it could go a lot of different ways with everybody else, I think.
You brought up being able to shoot the ball. Let's go over to Auburn, which that was something where they were not good at last year, the 3-point shooting. I would say they weren't good at it, just there was not consistency, night in, night out. I think outside of Trey Donaldson, maybe that was the only consistent 3-point shooter they had. But looking at Auburn, and last week at Media Day, Bruce Pearl would not commit on a starting 5. He said, our top 5 may not be the best in the SEC, but our next 5 are just as good. So the depth there. And obviously, Janai Broome is there, and you got Jalen Williams up front. But just when you look at this Auburn team, just what sticks out for you with this team coming into the season?
Yeah, I mean, look, their front court can compete with anybody. I mean, I think that's pretty clear when you just look at the depth there. When you start with Broome, an SEC Player of the Year type guy. Jalen Williams, I've always said Jalen Williams is one of the more underrated players in the league, but he's not underrated anymore because, he's done what he's done now. Started 33 games last year and 20 times. I think he had double figures in points, and so yeah, he's not underrated at this point. Dylan Cardwell, someone else, he'll block shots. So just with those 3 guys right there, like that is a great starting point in terms of your front court. And then you've got other guys who are coming in, right? Whether it's a Chad Baker Mazara, I know is getting a lot of high praise. I think heading into the season, transfer from Northwest Florida State. He'll be able to make shots for him, I think, in guard too. But yeah, I mean, so if you're looking at like who's going to start, I think it's pretty clear Broome and Williams are in there. But I do think it's interesting to think about what else it looks like, because you got options with those 4 guys specifically in the backcourt, whether it's Katie Johnson, Trey Donaldson, Aiden Holloway, Denver Jones. Yeah, I mean, I think this team's going to definitely shoot it better because we know Holloway can shoot it. You got to, how many times have you heard that before the Bruce Pearl team? Here comes a stud freshman coming in who can shoot the ball. That's a good thing to hear. And so, yeah, he can shoot it. I mean, Denver Jones will be just made an average 20 points a game like he did in Conference USA, but I'd be surprised if he's not a double-digit scorer. KD Johnson brings experience, may not bring a lot in terms of just consistent three-point shooting, but that's an option too. And that's where I think it becomes intriguing. Do you see a Janai Broome be able to step out and make threes? Maybe not 4 a game, but can he step out and make 1 or 2? Because we know with any big man, right? You're trying to get to the NBA. That's the conversation now. You got to be able to step out and make shots. I think they'll give him a chance to do that this season. Jalen Williams can shoot. So I think, this is a team that should be able to shoot the ball better. But like Bruce Pearl said too, it may be hard to figure out some nights who the top 5 are going to be on the floor. But I think 1 through 9, 10, or whatever, and they got as many options as anybody in terms of just seeing how some of these guys pan out. And, some of these guys can kind of take over and be, the next in line of great Auburn players at that specific position that we've seemingly talked about since Bruce Pearl's been there. So.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, and actually I was thinking about this last week when he was talking about the 10-man rotation. Basically, they're just as good. I mean, can they just do hockey substitutions at Auburn basketball? just do that. But KD Johnson, I feel like he's a player best suited to come off the bench because he brings a lot of energy. So I feel like he's a guy you bring off the bench, and maybe if they don't have the energy with the starting unit that night, because that's all he is energy when he comes off onto the floor. And if he comes off the bench like that, I feel like that would be a perfect role for him for this team.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say earlier too. Like, I don't know that I see him starting, and it's not because he's not capable. I just think, like you just said, that's the perfect way to put it. Like, I just think he fits a role better than anybody on the roster. Like, he fits the first guy off the bench, energy, if we're down 6, we're lackluster start, he's the perfect guy to bring in, which is why I think you will probably see some combination, like we said, of Broome and Williams, we know for sure starting. I think you're going to see Holloway, Denver Jones get a good crack at things probably from the start. Donaldson, I would be surprised if he's not in the mix again, just given his assist to turnover ratio and all that last year was so good, as a point guard. And so, I think that's where KD Johnson, the experience, being the 6th man last year, and 2, defensively, right? That's where he's going to make his mark, isn't it? I mean, he's someone just with the energy and everything. Like, we know he can score, but like just the way he plays, like that gives them something defensively off the bench too. So, I mean, they've got a lot of options in terms of how they rotate, this roster. And I mean, I think you put Auburn in there with another team where it's like, man, what does that minutes distribution look like on a team like this? All going to depend on how some of these new guys really fit into the mix. Like I said, whether it's an Aiden Holloway, Chad Baker-Mazara, guys like that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season, I think, for Alabama and Auburn. And the SEC overall is going to be fun, as always. I mean, this is going to be a fun conference. And we'll try to make assumptions during the non-conference, and then we'll get into conference, and then we'll find other things out. So it's always a fun ride between November all the way to March. And, Blake, this has been fun, including my stuff falling in the background. If you're watching on video, I hope that was not distracting.
Listen, Phil, if you can't tell, you hear my voice. My voice has been like out for like 3 or 4 days now, and so it's just now coming back. So I know I don't sound the greatest either. So we can chalk this up to like the technical issues on both sides. So
yeah, that couldn't have happened before I hit record. It had to happen as soon as I hit record. It's just like it is. But anyways, Blake, but people out there wanted to follow you online, where can they find you and all the work you're doing?
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Philip. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter/X, the Blake Lovell. You can find everything there. And of course, all the SEC stuff we do, Southeastern 14 on YouTube. You can search for that there. Of course, lots of SEC basketball stuff to get you ready for the season, and SEC football as well. And I know we'll talk a lot more about other stuff on the next time around. I know we wanted to get to some more stuff. Both of us had some scheduling things, but always a fun conversation, Philip, and always enjoyed.
Oh yeah, all the time, always fun, Blake. But appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking again sometime down the road.
You got it, my friend.